Gregor Mendel and genetics. These purple-flowered plants are not just pretty to look at. Plants like these led to a huge leap forward in biology. The plants are common garden peas, and they were studied in the mid-1800s by an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel. With his careful experiments, Mendel uncovered the secrets of heredity, or how parents pass characteristics to their offspring. You may not care much about heredity in pea plants, but you probably care about your own heredity. Mendel's discoveries apply to you as well as to peas and to all other living things that reproduce sexually. In this chapter, you will read about Mendel's experiments and the secrets of heredity that he discovered. Chapter Outline 6.1 Mendel's Investigations. Lesson Objectives. Explain why and how Mendel studied pea plants. Describe the results of Mendel's experiments. State Mendel's laws of segregation and independent assortment. Outline the genetics of inheritance. Vocabulary. Allele. Dominant allele. Genetics. Genotype. Heterozygote. Homozygote. Hybrid. Law of independent assortment. Law of segregation. Locus. Phenotype. Pollen. Pollination. Recessive allele. Introduction. People have long known that the characteristics of living things are similar in parents and their offspring. Whether it's the flower color in pea plants or nose shape in people, it is obvious that offspring resemble their parents. However, it wasn't until the experiments of Gregor Mendel that scientists understood how characteristics are inherited. Mendel's discoveries formed the basis of genetics, the science of heredity. That's why Mendel is often called the father of genetics. It's not common for a single researcher to have such an important impact on science. The importance of Mendel's work was due to three things: a curious mind, sound scientific methods, and good luck. Mendel and his pea plants. Gregor Mendel was born in 1822 and grew up on his parents' farm in Austria. He did well in school and became a monk. He also went to the University of Vienna, where he studied science and math. His professors encouraged him to learn science through experimentation and to use math to make sense of his results. Mendel is best known for his experiments with the pea plant Pisum sativum. Blending theory of inheritance. During Mendel's time, the blending theory of inheritance was popular. This is the theory that offspring have a blend, or mix, of the characteristics of their parents. Mendel noticed plants in his own garden that weren't a blend of the parents. For example, a tall plant and a short plant had offspring that were either tall or short but not medium in height. Observations such as these led Mendel to question the blending theory. He wondered if there was a different underlying principle that could explain how characteristics are inherited. He decided to experiment with pea plants to find out. In fact, Mendel experimented with almost 30,000 pea plants over the next several years. Why study pea plants? Why did Mendel choose common, garden variety pea plants for his experiments? Pea plants are a good choice because they are fast-growing and easy to raise. They also have several visible characteristics that may vary. These characteristics include seed form and color, flower color, pod form and color, placement of pods and flowers on stems, and stem length. Each characteristic has two common values. For example, seed form may be round or wrinkled, and flower color may be white or purple. Mendel investigated 7 different characteristics in pea plants. Controlling pollination. To research how characteristics are passed from parents to offspring, Mendel needed to control pollination. Pollination is the fertilization step in the sexual reproduction of plants. Pollen consists of tiny grains that are the male gametes of plants. They are produced by a male flower part called the anther. Pollination occurs when pollen is transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same or another flower. The stigma is a female part of a flower. It passes the pollen grains to female gametes in the ovary. Pea plants are naturally self-pollinating. In self-pollination, pollen grains from anthers on one plant are transferred to stigmas of flowers on the same plant. Mendel was interested in the offspring of two different parent plants, so he had to prevent self-pollination. He removed the anthers from the flowers of some of the plants in his experiments. Then he pollinated them by hand with pollen from other parent plants of his choice. When pollen from one plant fertilizes another plant of the same species, it is called cross-pollination. The offspring that result from such a cross are called hybrids. Mendel's first set of experiments. At first, Mendel experimented with just one characteristic at a time. He began with flower color. Mendel cross-pollinated purple and white-flowered parent plants. The parent plants in the experiments are referred to as the P, for parent, generation. F1 and F2 generations. The offspring of the P generation are called the F1, for filial, or offspring, generation. All of the plants in the F1 generation had purple flowers. None of them had white flowers. Mendel wondered what had happened to the white flower characteristic. He assumed some type of inherited factor produces white flowers and some other inherited factor produces purple flowers. To test this prediction, Mendel allowed the F1 generation plants to self-pollinate. He was surprised by the results. Some of the F2 generation plants had white flowers. He studied hundreds of F2 generation plants, and for every 3 purple-flowered plants, there was an average of 1 white-flowered plant. Law of segregation. Based on these observations, Mendel formulated his first law of inheritance. This law is called the law of segregation. It states that there are 2 factors controlling a given characteristic, one of which dominates the other, and these factors separate and go to different gametes when a parent reproduces. Mendel's second set of experiments. Mendel wondered whether different characteristics are inherited together. To answer these questions, Mendel next investigated 2 characteristics at a time. For example, he crossed plants with yellow round seeds and plants with green wrinkled seeds. Law of independent assortment. Mendel repeated this experiment with other combinations of characteristics, such as flower color and stem length. The results of Mendel's second set of experiments led to his second law. This is the law of independent assortment. It states that factors controlling different characteristics are inherited independently of each other. Mendel's laws in genetics. Mendel's discoveries would not have a big impact on science until 1900. Then, 3 different European scientists named De Vries, Correns, and Schermach independently arrived at Mendel's laws. Only then was Mendel's actual work rediscovered. As scientists learned more about heredity, they were able to describe Mendel's ideas about inheritance in terms of genes. In this way, the field of genetics was born. Genetics of inheritance. Today, we know that characteristics of organisms are controlled by genes on chromosomes. The position of a gene on a chromosome is called its locus. In sexually reproducing organisms, each individual has 2 copies of the same gene, one from each parent. The gene for a characteristic may have different versions called alleles, such as the purple flower allele, B, and the white flower allele, B. Genotype and phenotype. When gametes unite during fertilization, the resulting zygote inherits 2 alleles for each gene. The alleles an individual inherits make up the individual's genotype. An organism with 2 alleles of the same type, BB or BB, is called a homozygote. An organism with 2 different alleles, BB, is called a heterozygote. The expression of an organism's genotype produces its phenotype, which refers to the organism's characteristics. Lesson summary. Gregor Mendel experimented with pea plants to learn how characteristics are passed from parents to offspring. Mendel's first set of experiments led to his law of segregation. His second set of experiments led to his law of independent assortment. Mendel's work was rediscovered in 1900, leading to the understanding of genes and alleles. Lesson review questions.